Welcome to Collegial Conversations with your host, President of Intent Clinical, Diana Clark.
Welcome to Collegial Conversations. I'm Diana Clark. Today we're talking not just about what happens in families after they're formed. Today we're actually talking about families being formed, the place where our stories begin and our identities shape. The ways families are formed today is way more diverse than ever before, from IVF to surrogacy to adoption and beyond. There are countless paths to parenthood, each with their own joys, challenges, and deeply personal decisions and feelings. I'm especially delighted to introduce our guests today. Joining me is Arden O'Connor, founder and CEO of Intent Clinical, friend, and importantly for this conversation, a mother of 2 toddlers and 2 dogs, I might add. With her today is Sophie Masson, a fertility navigation consultant who played a vital role in Arden's own journey to parenthood and who now brings that same expertise to Intent Clinical's specialized fertility services. We're going to talk briefly about hopes, hurdles, and hopefully healing that come with the many different ways families are built today. Welcome, Sophie. Welcome, Arden.
Thank you very much, Diane.
And thank you for acknowledging the 2 dogs as my children. I feel very passionately that they are
Part of the family, part
Yes.
of the family,
part of the family.
part of the family. So, Arden, I'm going to start with a couple of questions to you. I gave away the clue that Sophie was vital to you in your navigation journey. Let's talk about how you formed your family. It was not the traditional road, either in timing, in formation, or in way. How did it happen?
Sure. It is not the way I envisioned as a Irish Catholic person from Boston, that when I was in my 20s, I had a image in my teenage years even of what my wedding was going to look like, how I was going to get married and what family would be. And it was not the way it happened. And it is all the more beautiful because of the tribulations we went through. So I'll try and shorten the story. I'm going to watch the clock myself because we know I can talk for days. So I had cancer when I was 25. I had leukemia. I knew then that my journey was going to be complicated. At the time, the technology wasn't available to freeze unfertilized eggs and have them unfrozen in an effective way. So my mom actually found somebody who could take ovarian tissue. And the hope was that, at 25, I'm thinking about when I'm in my mid 30s, which was my assumption at that time, that I would be able to reimplant that tissue into me and do IVF. Well, fast forward into my later 30s, I'm now waiting for Mr. Wonderful. He's still not there. And I'm thinking I might do this on my own. And so I started exploring, going through the process we assumed was going to be the best one. And I found out there'd only been one live birth at that time. One of the consults mentioned that I did mention that there was a small chance a leukemia could come back if the tissue that was taken when I had it was reimplanted in me. So that in my mind made that impossible. I also wasn't dating anyone for a long time. I wasn't dating anyone but in my late 30s, early 40s. And I knew that I wanted to be a mom. And so I started to seriously look at adoption, found out that as a single woman, it was going to take quite a long time. And because my brother had died from a heroin overdose, and frankly, because we deal with addiction and mental health every day, I had a particular sensitivity to knowing the genetics, which they said would be impossible. And one agency went so far as to say, you might have to just accept a mom smoking marijuana during the time of her pregnancy if you want a child within the next couple of years. So that, in my mind, ruled that option out. And so what was left was this idea of finding a sperm donor, finding an egg donor. And I knew that if I tried to carry, it was going to be a very high risk pregnancy, if at all. And so finding a surrogate was the third piece. And I was very lucky to have a very patient social worker who's also part of our team at Intent, Ellen Glazer, who helped me wrestle with all these decisions from an emotional standpoint, from a religious standpoint, from all the different angles. And I decided to go for it. And I was lucky enough to have a colleague at Intent, Whitney, who I'm forever grateful for. She introduced me to Dr. Choi at CCRM New York, who has moved on from CCRM, but is still a big part of the fertility industry. And Sophie at that time and continues to be the third party coordinator. And when we talk about third party, it's basically for folks like me who aren't using their genetic or aren't using all of their genetic material. So I didn't have a husband. I was going to be using a sperm donor. I didn't have a partner of any sort. So I was using a sperm donor, surrogate, and egg donor. So I had really the trifecta of third party. To fast forward the journey a little, and I'm burning up some time, so I'm going to go very quickly. I started out assuming I would have two children and space them a year apart, like most sane people try to do, and biology requires. And I had a great surrogate who I'm forever grateful towards. But unfortunately, she had a stillbirth at 36 weeks. And like any high achieving, no nonsense person, when that happened, I was hysterically crying and calling agencies that day saying, get me on your list. I know it's going to take a while to get a new surrogate. And I decided to do two surrogates at the same time, still single at this time. So I hired two surrogates in California, both of whom were lovely. And I'm still in touch with both of them. And they both were successful in having pregnancies. During their journey, I wound up reconnecting with someone I had dated years ago. David said, I'd like us to pursue dating. And I said, that's great. I've got two surrogates. At that time, they were either recently pregnant or on the verge. And I said, this is more of a, do you want to jump in or are you out? And I'll understand both. And he said, I want to be a dad. I'm excited. Would you consider a third? So we were blessed with two lovely girls, Ainsley and Arden, one named after me, one named after my best friend, Ainsley. And we are pursuing what's now our fourth surrogacy journey, this time with a new egg donor and David's sperm. So long-winded and a surrogate who has been incredibly patient, as we had two transfers that failed trying to use the eggs from a prior egg donor. So long-winded story to say it was quite a journey, lots of ups and downs, lots of financial headaches, emotional ups and downs. And I couldn't have done it without Dr. Choi and folks like Sophie and Dr.
Sophie.
Kalabian. Yes.
So, Sophia, on to you. I'm going to pummel you with a question or two.
I'm
So,
ready.
you ready? You met Arden. She's not just looking for a egg donor, not just looking for a sperm donor, not just looking for a surrogate, but she has to do that particular coordination of all three. How did you hear that information and help her?
Well, at the time, we have to put everything back into the timing. So it was back in 2020 when I first met Arden, right before COVID, because obviously Arden never does things the simple way. So she came in, and then I remember Dr. Choi came into my office and said, hey, I have a very interesting case. This is great for us right now. This is a woman who cancer survivor and wants to have a child right now with sperm donor, egg donor, and surrogacy. And at the time I looked at her, I was like, are we allowed to do that? Because at the time, just because of ethics around just having children in general, a single woman not using on any of her gametes or any kind of genetic material related to her, or, because I didn't use a sister or a brother, nothing, to have an embryo at the time was, very not necessarily controversial, I would say, but not the most common route. So at the time, surrogacy was not even allowed in New York State when she came in. We were on the verge of passing the rule, and obviously, so COVID hit, and then it delayed the whole thing. But the only thing was, the story was really passionate, and Arden came with nonsense and was like, I'm doing this. So when I met her, she told me I already have sperm. And I was like, okay, that's good, but we need to do this in another way. So, it was a really good case because she was very passionate. And then, we had to go through a few hoops, even us as a clinic, as structures as we are, because at the time, because surrogacy wasn't even allowed, we had to make sure that some of the clinics where we'll send the embryos were okay of taking a patient where embryos were created without any of her own gametes. So sperm donor, egg donor, and it's going into a surrogate. So some clinics said no. that they will not be able to take it because of their own regulation or policies. So we found a few clinics that took it, that were able to take it. Luckily, with COVID afterward, we were able to have all the surrogacy rules in place in New York State and make it happen for Arden. But it was a very challenging case and very interesting case from the get-go, obviously.
That's great. So I understand what somebody does, when you think about navigation. How does that word apply to somebody who is on this IVF or third-party system? What is navigation?
It's really going through all the steps and the checklists that are required to get to your end goal. So Arden's goal was have a baby in hand. My role into was assisting her until she gets there. For her, when she came, she already had sperm, but the first thing was for her to get an egg donor first. And then after that, getting a sperm source, making sure that they don't overlap genetically wise. So setting her up for a genetic consultation, setting all the donors for all her workup, and the sperm donor was already all set, but at least setting up the egg donor for that. And then once we have everything we needed for the egg donor, now we have to navigate through the egg donor's IVF cycle. So really navigate through her own journey, getting all her injectables, getting her calendar, map her out with exactly which day that she has to take her medication and take out the most important medication as the trigger shot. When is she coming to New York City also to continue monitoring with us? And at the end, having a retrieval and then get back home safely. And then you have the remaining piece, which is creating embryos. So retrieving the eggs, mixing with the donor sperm, and then now getting into the blastocyst stage of an embryo, and then making a biopsy all these embryo, waiting for the genetic testing on these embryos. And then after that, making sure the doctors call Arden in time to tell her, "Hey, so as we told you, your egg donor retrieved 20 eggs, and out of this we got maybe 10, 15 embryo that reached the blastocyst stage, and maybe 5 came back and are all normal and usable for your a surrogate in the future." So at that point, Arden got in touch. At the time, Dr. Choi was still there, so got in touch with Dr. Choi, and after that, then we are now in the process of looking for surrogates and really setting up the surrogacy process. So the surrogacy process is one of the most complex because there's so many other people that intervene in that process. So you have the surrogate herself, her family, you have the agency, the surrogacy agency, and the staff of that surrogacy agency. You have the clinical staff like myself at the clinic where the surrogate is going to have her embryo transfer. And you have an escrow also company that will retain all the money and for the surrogacy process. So there are a multiple and a lawyer at the end if the surrogacy agency doesn't provide you one. So you have multiple actors constantly intertwining and communicating. And your role, my role at the time was to make it the most seamless for Arden and for my patients in general. It may be a little hard at first because you need to coordinate everyone and everyone is not on the same page. And also we are not on the same agenda, the same timeline. Because if you think about it on the clinical side, I want to know when the surrogate can come for her first 1-day workup. And after that, I just want to make sure that legal is in place and then we can start a frozen embryo transfer process, basically. So those are the clinic priority. If you look at the agency priority is to really get a surrogate match with a patient, get that transaction done out of the way, and then send her for a 1-day workup to have a medical clearance, basically. So once they locked in their medical clearance, some agency think that their job is kind of done, and I'm like, no, you have 10 more months, potentially plus 3.
Exactly.
So these are the things that we bump against, but it's just such it's a very, very convoluted path, if we can say.
So it sounds very
Arden,
simple.
yeah,
Yeah, I was just gonna
yeah, I
say.
was gonna say, that just sounds daunting to me. I'm imagining that there are feelings at every one of these
Yes.
junctures.
Yes.
The legal feelings, the emotional feelings when you're telling your family about it, all of these things must
Yeah.
engender big feelings.
So I'll say a couple comments. So one, I've spoken openly about my journey at a couple of Harvard Business School alumni events, and I've had women come up to me and say, I went to this great school. I consider myself highly competent and I don't know what I'm doing. And, Sophie made the point I had sperm, but I had no clinic to send the sperm to. And frankly, sperm can be purchased fairly easily if you go to a traditional cryobank, whereas an egg donor, it can take, it can take weeks to get them cycled and the contracts and this, and a surrogate can take 18 months. So I did everything in a order that was totally backwards. So that's one. Two, when you're having children this way, I was very open because that's my personality. I shared everything, which was not a mistake because I'm not going to just show up out of nowhere, never being pregnant with a baby. But I have to say, everybody knew that I was going through this. So every 12 minutes, my cousin Rory, who I adore more than most of my family, it would ask, where's the baby? Where? And I was like, okay, I don't have any news to share. And then you can imagine if you have a stillbirth at 36 weeks, I had a nursery set up, all the things. So I think overarching comments would be very hard to navigate. You don't know which process you're going through. You don't know, and not that finances are driving all of this, but for most of us, and certainly for me, it's a consideration. You're not sure that if you put money here, it may mean that they don't have an egg donor you want, and now you've lost the deposit there and you got to go somewhere else. So it's a highly fragmented. It reminds me very much of the addiction field where we have been for years, but started quite fragmented, unregulated, a little bit cowboy-esque. And that's very much, in my opinion, where the fertility field is. As private equity comes in, as more national institution comes in, more regulation, I think we'll see changes. But right now, surrogacy agencies, comp for surrogates are all over. The agency fees are all over. Some places promise we can get you a surrogate in 3 months, but you're going to pay triple what you normally would. And some places say it's going to take you 2 years. And some people will take a case like mine and some people won't. So it's very confusing. And the point that you asked, which is a great one, is the emotions. And in the beginning, every little win I tried to celebrate. I found the surrogate, yay. Then the surrogates get nixed by the clinic. I remember when our first surrogate got nixed by the clinic. The surrogate, this last time I'll say, and I thought I was pretty experienced. We had 2 failed embryo transfers with an egg donor that would have meant a child that was a half sibling to our 2 daughters, which was really important to us. And then you got to kind of start over. I thank God I was raised to be a resilient human. My husband is the same way. But for some people, this is their last embryo and it's their genetics. And so then you say that's gone. How does it feel? And so, long-winded way of saying, I had a therapist who was very good. I have somebody like you, Diana, who keeps me in check. I work at a clinical company. I like to think I'm fairly self-aware. I read a lot. I meditate. I listen to a lot of podcasts. And I honestly have a religious practice. And that all that stuff helped me in those moments when I was ready to tear my hair out because one surrogate said, hey, I don't feel like taking the COVID booster shot. Totally understand. It's her body. For me, it was like, oh my gosh, my child could get COVID. And so I don't want to tell her what to do, but I'm also scared. And I always say to women going through this process, I hope that you have a support system, find a support system, because especially when I was considering doing this on my own, even with very supportive parents, there were moments that I'm like, this is just really hard. And it's from an hours perspective, I run my own company, so I had a lot of flexibility, but it can feel like a part-time job. You're reviewing contracts, going back to the drawing board when something doesn't work. So you have to
Not
really
even
want
to
it.
mention the looking for what kind of egg donor do I want? What kind of genetics are, I mean, that in and of itself must be quite an exploration.
I mean, I think that's why we're here in
Right.
10 Clinical doing this. I would say I came in and Sophie can tell you story after story, I'm sure, of like, I wanted somebody who went to Harvard and someone who's blonde, even though this is fake blonde. I wanted somebody who was just like me and was in the Boston area and I could meet her. You have all these visions of how it's going to work. And then you get into the mix of it and you're like, there's timing. Have they produced eggs before? How much you want to spend. The first time you go through this journey, for me at least, is very different than the fourth time I'm going through this journey. How long do you want to wait? All those things. And there's the reality of what's available. If you are somebody of color, it's much more difficult to find somebody than it is if you are of, European descent and you're looking for somebody who is blonde. If you want someone with an Ivy League degree, that's much more complicated than saying, I'll accept anybody who's even never donated before. I think one of the things that I think Sophie can be really helpful, and Sophie, I'll let you speak on this, is like helping families think rationally in a
Mm-hmm.
way that gets them to Sophie's terminology, baby in hand. I remembered that, and it's so visual because that's what you want, but
Mm-hmm.
the steps to get there don't always lead you there.
No, and unfortunately, and the thing is, one of the main issue is when patients come for the first time, obviously they are charged with emotions, right? So when you are trying to take an emotional process and trying to make it a pragmatic process, you know, it's almost like impossible. So it's a step-by-step process, right? So the first thing is, and Arden, I think her case is very unique because of her medical background. She kind of knew, and she was forced by destiny and life and
Hmm.
biology say this is what it is, right? Her body went through complete radiation. So I'm not even sure that even at that time we would have found a high risk obstetrician who would have cleared her and say, yeah, let's put an embryo in there, right? Because that's the
Right.
reality. Because you could have tried, but the
Hmm.
reality is, I think Arden came in already knowing that this was my route. So
Great point.
in a way, I think Arden was already so focused on the goal that she was one of the most, if I can say, emotionally manageable patients to help navigate in a way because she knew there was no you don't have it, right? But when you have patient, because most traditional patients come in the hope that, okay, if I come to you, maybe we can try one more time IVF with my eggs, one more time IVF with my sperm. Let's try one more transfer for me to get pregnant,
Hmm.
and let's see. That's what I need to get closure for. And then it doesn't work. And then they go back and they're like, okay, let's try this protocol again. So the road to actually get there
Baby
to
in hand to get to baby in hand.
is
Right.
really, really challenging when patient comes just like that. They're emotionally charged. And then once they finally understand that, okay, because sometimes I tell them you're gonna spend $25,000 on IVF once, and then and then maybe another $5,000 or $6,000 on transfer, and it's not gonna go anywhere. Why don't we put this money towards something where it can work? So now I think patient kind of now start wrapping their head around the idea. And then comes into play a lot of social worker and mental health specialists that can really, really help you navigate really the loss of control that you as a patient feel like you are having, whether it's the female or the male, because it happens to a lot of male too, where we tell them you're gonna have to use donor sperm. And how do you feel about that? How is your companion feel about that? So once you get to that part, then they can start visualizing profiles and looking at going to agency, looking at profiles and really trying to project themselves. And what I try to remind them is like, this is not you trying to project yourself in that person because we are all unique individuals. So you will never find your exact match or exactly what you're looking for unless you have an identical twin somewhere, and I'm happy to go and explore her eggs. But if she's identical to you, has the same DNA, most likely she may be dealing with the same issues that you are right now, right?
Right.
So these are the things that you need to think about and like really try to project yourself. And then you have your partner, if you're doing it with your male partner doing it with you, and try to see, okay, like, is this the right candidate for us? And a lot goes into it. Do we want to do a known donation? Do we want to do an anonymous donation? And if we want to do it known, is it just a ID disclosure when the child is 18 for the child to be in contact with the egg donor just
Hmm.
to see what she looks like? Or am I having coffee with her someday? Am I FaceTiming her once or twice? So these are the things you need to come to terms with, discuss, and you do what feels right for you at the time. Most female patient comes and tell me nothing felt right. I just chose somebody And because the time was going and I realized that I want this, I really want that child like yesterday. So I just did it. But am I in peace with my choice? Maybe not. And maybe I will when I see that little face in my
Little
hand.
baby.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think, everybody's path is a little unique, obviously, to it, but Arden was very determined for sure.
I'm
N- eh,
shocked by
eh,
that
eh, eh,
news. Yes.
It was easier. I mean, I knew at 26 this was probably going to be a very unique
You'd
path, and
already mourned.
I'd
Yeah.
already mourned it then, and I mourned it through the years, seeing families, and even in the time, of course, there was a part of me that's like, oh, my child's not going to look to me. And to your point about the little face, like my girls look nothing like me. We have the most amazing egg donor for our current children, and probably an amazing sperm donor. I don't know him. There's not one part of me that looks at them and says they're not mine. But
mhm,
it would have been very different if I decided at 38 I want a child on my own. I presume I can use my eggs, and then I found out I couldn't. That mourning process plus
mhm.
going forward with so
Right.
many logistics is different than if you kind of knew that already and you're going into the process with certain assumptions.
So, as we wrap up, I'm shocked by how long we have talked because I'm truly fascinated by the number of things, the number of steps, the number of decisions, the number of ways that you are confronted with this idea that I am doing this differently every
Mhm.
day and the amount of work that must take. I wonder how anybody does it without you, Sophie. I wonder that. How do people try and navigate these kinds of decisions, these kinds of processes without a Sophie? Sounds horrible.
Well, thank you very much. But you'll be surprised. A lot of times people want to do things on their own because because first of all, I think it's a lot of lack of information. I think most people don't know, you don't know what you don't know. So you
No.
start, because think about a same-sex couple, for example,
Hmm.
who is technically infertile because they're missing a few pieces. And they're like, well, we're going to get our friend and we'll do
Uh-huh.
it. It's going to be fine. And then, she'll carry for us. And then they start realizing little by little, yeah, we haven't done genetics. Yeah, she hasn't been tested. And then in a few years from now, who truly has custody of that child? Because, she was just a friend. And then, a lot of things start getting into it. And then you realize it's not as simple as you think it could be. Uh,
Hmm.
so you do need a structure. This is a process, making an embryo, creating lives, having a kid is a process that requires a lot of structure. So you need to actually discuss about it. You need to have a clinic that can help you actually navigate through the process, or to have, a navigation specialist that can be alongside of you and really truly like help you narrow down all these steps and really like keep you focused at each time. Because I think most of the time, even for people that have a ton of resources, they get lost in the process, right? You're going to give them a
Of
recommendation
course.
for one agency, for one clinic. And by the time they call me at night, they're talking to me about like they did this. I'm like, no, 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 that's not what we're doing. Let's go back again and try to do this because there are multiple options out there, but they're not all for you, right? So you really need to find a way to personalize your care as much as possible and make it efficient, right? So, like Arden said, sometimes efficiency doesn't rhyme with saving money, unfortunately, in that field. But sometimes it can. Sometimes
Uh,
if you're efficient and you
You
try
don't
to
know.
narrow it down to one or two options, then well, you're not looking here, you're not spending time here, you're not wasting money here. Well, it helps. It helps, And unfortunately, this is a field where you cannot say, I told you so, right? Because that's not the
No.
type of, that's not the
No.
Feels you can't say I told you so. Nobody likes.
It's on my desk, but I rarely get to say it.
Not to
Yeah.
oversimplify like a very complex process. One adage that I had in my brain is you're not going to get fast, high quality, and inexpensive all at the same time. And when you say high quality, you're not people aren't high quality. When I say high quality, I think about an experienced surrogate who has done this before, or an experienced egg donor who has given and had success. Doesn't mean you need those things, but if you think about like high correlations with success, those kind of are hedges against going a route of somebody unknown. And so you're not going to get all three. You're going to have to probably pick two. And so for me, it was always like, I want the highest chances of success and I want it fast. And so I knew I was going to compromise on finances and I was in the position to do it. The other thing that I think is just important to know is more is not always better. I mean, I'm laughing when she's talking about agencies, even in this fourth journey, and I consider myself a fairly big expert. She gave me 3 agencies. I'm calling her back with 6 other candidates. She's like, where'd you get that one? I'm like, oh, I found it over here. And she's like, why did you sign it? I told you to stick to these 3 agencies. And so because these are emotionally charged positions, again, not to draw another analogy, it's the same as somebody saying, I need a help for my son who's got a heroin addiction, and they go Google it. And now it's like, I could do outpatient, this psychiatrist, this drug, this, and they're trying to throw spaghetti at a wall. And you might hit jackpot that way, but you might also waste money, time, and frankly, your energy. And for me, that was the piece when it failed the first time. I did become a little bit more focused in saying, I just want a baby in hand. I'm not going to make this more complicated than it needs to be. I'm not going to start with, I want the surrogate in Boston so I can welcome them at Children's Hospital. I'm just going to say I want it in this time frame. I'm willing to pay up to this. And here are my few things that are important to me. And for me, it was like, I need them to agree to, COVID shots. I need a NICU in their hospital. If somebody said, do you need them to eat organic food? For me personally, I was like, no, I don't care if they eat organic food or not. Yeah, please don't eat McDonald's every day. But what am I going to do about it was my attitude.
Yes.
So I was like, these are the things. And that made it easier. It also made it easier to take the volume down in my head, to not get miffed at every little thing. And I had a few things that surrogates did during the process that annoyed me. I'm sure I annoyed the hell out of them too. But I went to my therapist when I got irregulated. I called Sophie. I called the agency and talked to the coordinator. I did something, because otherwise, the only person you're punishing during this process is you. And for me, it was so important to think about, like, when my kids come, baby in hand, when they're 5, I want to say, you want to meet your surrogate? You can. Or here's a picture of her, and this was the relationship we had. And I don't want to think back to that time and be embarrassed on how I behaved or upset that I can never introduce them because it ended in a fractured state. And I'm blessed to say that that's not how it was, that even any disagreements we had, we resolved them. Everybody held the babies. Like, it is as seamless as it was, and I'm still in touch with them. So that feels very good to say versus, other stories where it doesn't wind up that way. And my last recommendation, anybody going through this, please do not Google surrogacy gone wrong.
No.
I did that, and there's a very big article out about now. I did it years ago, and I was like, it had so much brain space for so long that it took a while for me to talk myself down.
Thank you. Sophie, thank you for joining me today.
Diana.
Arden, thank you as well.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you.
And for those of you who are watching this today, if you like this, check out Intent Clinical's other webinars, podcasts, videos on intentclinical.com. Thank you.